So we're going to get started, and I'm delighted to see you all this morning. This week's Parsha is named for Pinchas, the zealot who killed an Israelite man and his midnight lover. So to set the stage, we need to remember that the Israelite men were apparently being led into idolatry by the seductive midnight women. And we learned that at the end of last week's Parsha, and that's not a part that we talked about at all. Pinchas is Aaron's grandson, and he slays this pair. And we're told that he slays them out of zealotry and love for God. He ends up being rewarded by God in spite of what on the surface appears to be a rash, impulsive act of violence and vengeance. The commentators point out that because of the idolatry of the Israelite men, the entire encampment was about to be punished by God. And God withheld that punishment because of Pinchas's act, and that's why he was rewarded. So after this opening, pretty gruesome episode in the Parsha, the Parsha goes on, and we have a census counting all of the men over the age of 20. And one of the purposes of this census is to count who will be available for battle should it be necessary as the people approach the promised land. Another purpose of the census is to figure out how the land, once the Israelites inhabit the promised land, how it's going to be divided. And that's going to happen according to the size of the tribe. So it's really important to have the accurate numbers. And it's important to remember here that we're really nearing the end of this wandering in the desert. So after the census is taken, 5 sisters, these are the daughters of Zelophehad. I'm not pronouncing the name properly, and I apologize about that. But these 5 sisters, Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcha, and Tirzah, approach Moses, the priests, and the entire assembly at the entrance to the house of meeting. And they make their case that their father, who died, was an upstanding man, and they're very specific to say he was not part of Korach's rebellion, and he had no sons. And they petitioned for their father's portion of land. So it's really interesting, because, inheritance always at that point was going only to the sons, or to the men. They had to do, and they ended up doing this in a really particular way. And I think it was really smart and politically astute. They were respectful. They did it in public, and they were very, very clear. Chapter 27, verse 4, they say, "Let not our father's name be lost to this clan because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen." The result of this episode is that the sisters do get the inheritance that up until this time only went to the sons. And God rewrote the laws about inheritance and changed that forever. So after this incident, the Parsha goes on, and God is preparing Moses for his own death. And Moses is reminded that he's not going into the promised land because of his incident several weeks ago in Parsha Chukat, where he struck the rock to bring forth water instead of speaking to the rock as he had been instructed. Moses also at this time picks Joshua to be his successor, and then the Parsha goes on to end with a very lengthy and detailed description about communal sacrifices, when they should happen and how they should happen. So what really stood out for me was noticing that both Pinchas and the daughters of Zelophehad experienced what I would call righteous anger. They were aware of a wrong and they were compelled to right that wrong. However, they did this in a really different kind of way. I think Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcha, and Tirzah are remarkable. I was imagining in that time and place what it must have been like for them. Women were almost invisible. They weren't counted in the census. They couldn't own property. They were always in the background. There are some notable exceptions, but there are very few. The courage that it must have taken them to even go to the entrance of the tent of meeting, to confront Moses and the priests and the other men who were there, and then to speak so clearly. No begging, no, please, sir, I want to talk to you about my inheritance, maybe. None of this kind of whiny, wimpy thing. They said, give us. They demanded respectfully, without, kind of, raising their fists in a figurative kind of way. They said, give us what's rightfully ours. I think it would be so great to be able to channel this kind of composure when angry. And yes, I think they were angry. Theirs was kind of a cool anger, one that could be managed. Pinchas was hot. He raged. We're all capable of hot anger when we're not thinking and we simply react. Maybe with rage, maybe with violence, like Pinchas, maybe with violent words, maybe with withdrawing and kind of running away. Whatever is instinctive for us is how we react when we're filled with hot anger. And this kind of reaction is usually not very helpful. The sisters were able to rely on one another and support each other. So if any one of them had been filled with hot anger, the others were able to help temper it and cool it down. They were able to use their anger to really affect change. So my hope is, as we sit today, that we can remember that we all have some Pinchasins. We also have Milcha, Noah, Hoga, Mala, and Tirzah in us. And maybe we can use our breath to tap into our inner wisdom so that when confronted with challenging situations, we can act with clarity and in alignment with our true values. So I invite us to sit and let's take a posture that's really like strong, like the sisters, and proud, as though we're about to approach the tent of meeting where the Mishkan is housed. And now let's take a couple of cleansing breaths. Inhaling and exhaling fully. And again. And one more time. And as we sit today, I invite you to think about a challenging situation that you might be facing. bring it to mind. And as you do that, you could try bringing gentle curiosity to the situation and investigate that situation in all of its layers and all of its perspectives. And once you've done that, you might be able to discern a whole range of possibilities for wise action. So we'll sit for about 12 minutes in silence. So as you are gently and slowly coming back to the room, going to read a poem entitled Wage Peace by Judith Hill. Wage peace with your breath. Breathe in firemen and rubble. Breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red-winged blackbirds. Breathe in terrorists and breathe out sleeping children and freshly mown fields. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wage peace with your listening. Hearing sirens, pray loud. Remember your tools, flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers. Make soup. Play music. Memorize the words for thank you in 3 languages. Learn to knit and make a hat. Think of chaos as dancing raspberries. Imagine grief as the outbreath of beauty or the gesture of fish. Swim for the other side. Wage peace. Never has the world seemed so fresh and precious. Have a cup of tea and rejoice. Act as if armistice has already arrived. Celebrate today.